There are laws. There are the non-compliance. There are laws, and if the industry does not go with the level, for example, the threshold level or the TMDL and whatnot, they may have to pay. The non-compliance is kind of like a penalty thing. That means you have to pay your right to pollute, and that's one thing. And I think another thing is we want to educate the industry that money is one thing, but the ethic is another thing. You want to make sure that the environment is clean, not only because you have to do so because the government asks you to do so, otherwise you will get penalized or you will have to pay fines or something, but also you have to do so because it is morally right. It is the ethic. You need to produce, the chemical, but produce them safely. And I think that may be another thing.
I will agree with you. I was going to go right to regulation and policy and the laws. So that is the primary way. I'll just offer, I think the questioner said that noncompliance was one of the reasons that environmental justice issues arise. It certainly can be, but there are other situations that that can cause environmental justice situations to arise, citing the citing decisions for where to actually place new facilities. That's a good place to start. And that's where communities can get engaged to talk about the process and about the facilities that are coming in, and looking at the full scope of facilities that are in a community. One thing that I haven't heard mentioned a lot so far in the conversation is pollution from multiple sources. Some communities are actually quite burdened by pollution that comes from a variety of different sources. And that, I think, is something that is important to think about and consider.
Yes, indeed. I think the non-point source pollution is also something. Oh, yeah, I was just concurring with what Casey was saying. Non-point source pollution, while it may not be caused by one industry, yet it is a major problem today in water pollution in the major receiving water bodies.
So I do not believe EPA can offer up legislation to Congress. I think Congress is the part of the government that writes legislation. They're part of the legislative branch. EPA is part of the executive branch. So I do not believe we can offer up legislation. We sometimes may be asked to provide expert consultation on draft of a legislation, but no, we do not offer up legislation.
I think Casey is an expert on that. Yeah. they may have to follow some very stringent quality control. For example, in major universities or government agencies like EPA, they have quality control. They have certain kind of protocol. For example, if you go out to the field to collect water samples, you have to do this and do this and whatnot. And therefore, there are some stringent, protocol that one has to follow. And next is, when you are doing analysis and whatnot, one also needs to make sure that you have enough replicates so that, you are sure that what you are measuring or what you are observing is actually reflecting what is in the real world. And I think that are important.
I agree with everything that you said, and I will reiterate the data quality piece. That's really important. Another thing that this is getting a little bit into the nitty gritty of what we call risk assessment. Dr. Tong mentioned it a little while ago, that relationship between exposure and a health effect. Making that case from a scientific perspective is very important. And you might have one study that suggests an exposure or a dose response relationship, but really looking at the whole body of evidence can be very important when you're looking at science within a regulatory context. So not only looking at just one study or two studies, but doing a systematic review of the literature and looking at the entire body of evidence is really necessary when you're taking a regulatory action and looking at something like that relationship between exposure and health effects. Can I add one other comment as well? I just thought of something. Peer review is very important as well. I can't believe I failed to mention that. So the scientific peer review process is very critical. We look at studies that have been peer reviewed, and that kind of goes hand in hand with quality. It's another way to ensure the scientific rigor of the science that we're looking at. So I will just offer that is outside of my area of expertise. So I probably won't be able to answer that question.
Well, it is also outside my area of expertise, but I do think that trade and cap is a way of, is a different way of regulating the pollution or the pollutant level in the environment. Because anyway, there will be certain amount of pollutants in the, let's say it is air or water pollution, there will be certain amount of pollutants in the air or the water because you have a cap. For example, they ask that the cap is for how many units or whatever chemicals. And then for a company that produce less than that amount can trade or offset it with another company. And therefore, the bottom line is it may be an economical, very feasible solution. And yet, if you want to have zero pollution, this is not what it is for. You will definitely have some kind of contaminants and pollutants in the media, in the air, in the water, and whatnot. And to me, trade and cap makes a lot of sense economically because then the industry can trade and they can, do things like that. But environmentally speaking, we have to be careful of what kind of contaminants we are talking about. Do we really have an air bubble surrounding us that we can use it as, the totality for contamination? How are we going to set the bubble? That kind of thing. And therefore, one may need to look into what kind of contaminants that they are talking about. And then also, how big is the bubble? How big is the threshold? I think for sorry, Casey, you go first.
All right, I was going to say that's a really great question. Getting alarming results. I mean, I think that that makes science communication probably a little more, I'm going to say a lot more challenging. It's science communication can be hard enough as it is, but alarming. So, and I don't think I've ever personally been in this situation where I have to deal with alarming results, but I think trying to just be as transparent as possible. Just these are just kind of basic communication principles. Being as transparent as you can. If there are data gaps or uncertainty, being very clear about that. Sometimes a preliminary study might show you one thing, and you need to go back and do some additional work. So I think just being transparent about what you know, what you don't know, and what additional work might be needed to be done is very important when communicating science in general.
I agree totally, Casey. I think transparency is very important. I think being a scientist, you have to be honest. You have to tell the truth. Even if the data reflect some kind of, alarming results, I think one need, if you are a true scientist, one need to tell, your story, your data, what the data are. Transparency and honesty is indeed, the most important thing, because we want to, protect the integrity of your research, protect the integrity of your data and results. Another thing is, I think for a scientist is you also need to be responsible. You have to be responsible of what you said, and also responsible of what you have done. If, for example, in your experiment, you did not do this, and not only that, you have to be honest and state out front that you have not done this part, but did the other part. You also have to be responsible. You have to say, well, maybe in my second stage, I need to do this. And because I haven't do this, you may have to take my results, with discretion or something. And therefore, you have to be responsible in what you said.
I'm not sure that I will be a good person to answer this question either. I'm not a compliance expert, so I will defer to Dr. Tong and see if she has comments on this one.
I am not a compliance expert either. I'm just a professor. From what I know is a lot of times our regulatory and compliance areas are based on honor system. And a lot of times the industry tell the government, be it local, state, or federal government, what they are doing, what they produce, and what kind of contaminants or pollutants that they are producing. And there is a bit of honor system in that, because a lot of times, the regulatory agency may not go back and check them. They may, but it is not every minute, every second that they are going to do it. And therefore, I think in today's America, the compliance is basically on the shoulder of the industry, of what they, what they report to the government. And of course, the government has the duty to check on what they have done. And if, for example, they are non-compliance, then of course they are being charged. Like in Cincinnati, our MSD is doing really well these days, but in the past they violated, a lot of, rules and regulations, because our sewer overflow, our CSO, and our sewer treatment is not that well, and of course the Ohio EPA will charge them with non-compliance fees and whatnot. But what I want to say is that, the regulatory agency usually catch the industry after the fact. And it is the industry that goes out first and based on the honor system to report to the regulatory agency what they are doing. And whether this system is a perfect one, I don't want to comment on it. But I think there are still, of course, some rooms for improvement.
And you mean the media, when you say the press, just to make sure I that's a very good question. I think local media can be a powerful voice. So environmental justice situations tend to be fairly local. They're location based in general. PFAS is an example where exposure is, Dr. Birnbaum said in 99% of us, 99% of us. But many environmental justice situations, so if you have a local newspaper, I think the press, the media can be a very powerful force in telling some of those stories. And journalists, unlike scientists, know how to tell a compelling story. They start with the bottom line first. They don't go through they're going to start with that bottom line. So I think they can be an important component in talking about environmental justice issues. There are not nearly as many local newspapers as there once were, which I think is that can be a challenge for raising some of the more local issues and telling the stories of those local issues.
Well, I think the media is doing a very good job in kind of educating the public of what's going on. And many investigative journalists, they are fine journalists, and they kind of relate, what's happening to the public. And I think, this is a very good advantage for the modern society, because we have a separate independent agency that helps, the public to understand what is going on and whatnot. And it is not only from the government or from whatnot, but we have an independent agency. But I also think that the journalists have to have, a code of conduct. And I'm sure, many of them follow the code of ethics, the code of conduct. We do not want to have a media, to have biased opinions. Again, the honesty, telling the truth, telling the story, the responsibility for the journalists is are very important, because this is the only way to make sure that any investigative journalists are holding the job right and telling the right story. And I think we are fortunate that we are living in a society that we have different bodies of actors, stakeholders, and whatnot, that will give us, different kinds of information so that we are educated on what's going up there. But we also would like to hold all this, professionals to a higher standard, that they are telling really the truth and that they are not biased. They do not have another agenda, be it political or economic or whatnot. They do not have another agenda, but they are responsible. They keep up the integrity. They keep up the honesty.
Well, I can offer EPA's definition, which is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to developing, implementing, or enforcing environmental laws, regulations, or policies. So that's the definition that EPA uses. I don't know if there is broad agreement as to whether or not that is the definition. I'm very interested to hear Dr. Kong's answer.
I think this is the definition, yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. So I have a chemistry undergraduate degree, and I knew I did lab work for a while, but knew I didn't want to do that forever. I actually did lab and field work. I worked for industry for 5 years at the beginning of my career. I became very interested in health effects of chemicals and pollutants after a while, and my graduate degree is in public health. And I came to my job at EPA at the Science Policy Interface, I think really because I like science a lot. I think science is exciting. I don't do science right now. I've done lab work in the past, as I mentioned, but I don't do science right now. I love working with scientists, but what excites me even more is seeing science mobilized and used to inform change, science-based policy that really impacts the public health of everyone in the United States. I think that's very exciting. So that's how I personally came to this point, as I loved science. I didn't want to be a researcher. I knew I wanted to impact public health. And it's a nice, EPA affords a really nice opportunity to do that. We do have public health central to our mission. And I believe the second part of the question, I'm just looking at the chat, was how do you think individual researchers can become better integrated with institutions like the EPA? I think there are a couple of thoughts that come to mind. researchers at the graduate, just the postgraduate level, EPA offers postdocs for people just completing their PhDs. We offer internships for students who are interested in science or policy. And we participate with a variety of fellowship programs like the Association of Schools of Public Health Fellowship Program. AAAS has a fellowship program. So that's a good way for graduate students or people just completing their PhD can have opportunities to work with EPA through those mechanisms.
I do have a question for the audience here, if you don't mind. I really would like to learn more from you